asking better questions is one of the keys to improving your conversation and communication skills. Why? Because asking better questions leads to increased critical thinking. You see, you've been set up to fail. If you have gone through the education system from kindergarten, elementary school, high school, college, maybe you got your master's degree, maybe you got your PhD, and maybe you got some other advanced degrees and certifications, the education system has really set you up for failure. And the reason why is because all throughout schooling, they have been indoctrinating you with this idea that you got to come up with the right answer. I mean, you think about it. No matter what certification program or degree or diploma you go through these tests and you have to study hard for the tests, and then the tests ask you a series of questions. And depending on how you answer those questions, if you put the right answers to those questions, you get good grades. And if you get good grades, it kind of feels like you did well. And then you go out into the real world, and the real world has all these nuances, all of these happenings, all of these structures that aren't quite covered in that degree or in that college system. And so it's been programming you to believe that in order to get through life, in order to be successful in the workplace, that we need to come up with the right answers. Now, I agree, there's nothing wrong with that. Coming up with the right answers, coming up with really good answers is an intelligent skill to have. But have you ever thought the flip side of that? Well, who's asking the questions? Whoever can come up with really good questions is a genius then. If coming up with good answers is smart, then coming up with great questions is genius. And the reason why is because if you're asking the questions, you've done enough thinking to know what questions to ask. You have the depth of knowledge to know what to ask and how to guide the conversation, how to lead the discussion as well, and the direction you want it to go. It is said that whoever asks the questions is in control of the conversation. It's been said that whoever asks questions with confidence and with thoroughness is positioned as seen as an authority. Think about all the great interviewers out there, Oprah Winfrey, for example, right? They've made a fortune by being able to ask great questions that engage the audience and that solicit deep thinking from the interviewee. So in this video, what I want to share with you is a really important framework on how you can ask better questions so that you can be a better communicator. My framework on how you can ask better questions follows the word F.L.A.R.E, F-L-A-R-E. So each step of the framework will begin with the first letter of that word. And the first step of the framework starts with the letter F. And F means to formulate. Now, on the most simplest terms, you're formulating questions, but I want to share with you something a little bit deeper. What do you do to formulate great questions? And one of the most important things is to realize that you're not just asking questions for yourself. Now, it's possible. Some people ask questions because they want to satisfy their own curiosity. But I encourage you to look at this in terms of creating fair exchange, because you're asking questions to somebody. You're asking questions of somebody. So I would encourage you that when you're formulating questions, formulate questions to create that fair exchange. How can you ask better questions to engage better learning? How can you formulate questions so that the answer to that question gives them a breakthrough? How can you formulate questions so that when we are discussing the answers or approaching a decision in that question, that we can elevate our collaboration? Those are just some examples on how you can formulate in your mind to create fair exchange, benefit both ways, because questions are that powerful. Questions can shape the way things go from this point onwards. Questions are your answers. So that is why step number one is to formulate, but not just formulating for yourself, formulating for a clear outcome and for fair exchange. The second step to the F.L.A.R.E framework is L, and L stands for learn. If you want to be somebody who can ask great questions, you need to be a continuous lifelong learner. Why? Because your questions are limited by your learning. And when you're learning, it's not just about learning about a subject matter. For example, you can learn about leadership. Just because you've learned about leadership doesn't mean you can become a great leader. Have you ever noticed that? You can learn about psychology, but it doesn't mean you can really understand human behavior and be able to navigate through conflict. So don't just learn about a thing, learn from life. learn how to do it, learn how to apply it. So then that is important when you approach your learning processes, that you're approaching it from the mindset of the reason why I'm engaging in learning right now is because my purpose is to learn to master that thing. Learn for the purpose of mastery. Don't just learn for the purpose of learning about it. Right? So when you are learning for the purpose of mastery, eventually at some point your knowledge base gets big enough and you're thinking about what you know, you're reflecting on what you know, and this is a continuous journey. And as you reflect on what you know, you assimilate that into an understanding. Not until you truly understand what you know, can you really start to apply it. And over time, as you apply your knowledge, you develop wisdom. And from the place of wisdom, you deepen it over time through more reflection on what you know, through more thinking about what you know and reflecting upon it. And as you start to develop deeper wisdom, you can ask great questions. Great questions come from that depth of wisdom. Have you ever noticed that when we don't have depth of wisdom about that area, it's really difficult to know what to ask because we can't discern a good question from a bad question. So this is the key. Learn for the purpose of mastery. The third step of the framework starts with the letter A, and A is analyze. So what are you analyzing? The first thing to analyze is to really understand, well, what are your goals for this conversation? Well, every time you come into a conversation or into a meeting, there's an intention somewhere. The question is, are you setting the intention or someone else? Oprah Winfrey was someone who very famously has shared countless times, whenever she goes into a conversation, before the conversation even begins, she clarifies, what's the intent of our meeting today? What's the intent of our conversation today? So clarify that. Analyze, number one, the purpose, the intent of this conversation. The second thing to analyze is to really analyze the individuals who are present in the conversation. And in your analysis, it's not about making assumptions. It's not about making judgments about it, but being objective to really understand what are the priorities am I working with right now? What are the values of the people that are present? And how might I create a fair exchange for it? Really understanding and analyzing the individuals involved in the conversation. And the third area to analyze, we're still on analyze by the way, the third area to analyze is the contextual features of the conversation. What's the context in which we're meeting? Are we here in a business meeting where we're going to make a decision at the end of this meeting? What is the history or background we're all bringing to this? What do we understand to be the previous conversation leading to this one? Are there action items that we're bringing into here that we have not discussed yet or that we have to prioritize? So really all the nuances of the contextual features in the meeting right now. So when you bring in this lens of analysis, thorough analysis through thoughtful contemplation, then you're better able to ask questions in that moment. In my history of teaching this process of asking better questions and engaging in great conversations, one of the most common questions I ask is about that thinking time. How do I think about what I know? The questions get asked. And they also ask me, well, how do I reflect on my knowledge? How do I deepen my wisdom? Well, how do I do that? If those are the same questions you're asking, then I invite you to work with me. Every single week, I go through a deep and thorough training on that subject. And yes, it is possible to train on how to think. And yes, it is possible to train on the skills of critical thinking. So if you're serious about developing that skill for yourself, then below this video, the first link is to link and book a call with one of my expert advisors. You're going to be talking to someone who has experience, not my assistant, not a salesperson. And when you meet with my team, we're going to discuss for you what your current situation is, the goals that you intend to achieve in your career path, and how we might be able to help you and assist you get there. And if we're the right match and you end up working with me, then I look forward to being dedicated to helping you to train for those skills that you can take with you no matter where you go. The next step of the framework is the letter R, and R stands for reflect. Now, so much information out there on communication, and a lot of people say, you want to reflect to them what they just said. Like, I just heard you say this, did I understand you correctly? That's not what I'm referring to here. Sometimes in a conversation, if you take on that common advice and you reflect back to them what they heard, sometimes it can be very disruptive in the conversation. Or if you do that often enough, sometimes the other person can start to question, hey, how come you need to keep reflecting to me? Are you not listening? Are you not really understanding me? Are you having trouble keeping up here? So then I'm not teaching you to reflect on what you just heard. I'm teaching you to reflect internally on what you just heard. There's a difference. You see, so often I hear executives, when they're in conversations with senior executives, they're overly concerned with what they want to say next, how they want to respond. And when you are focused on your response, when you're focused on getting your point across, then you're not really present in truly hearing what they have to say. You might have been listening, but not hearing. And there's a difference between listening and hearing. And hearing allows you to hear the nuances of not just the words they choose to use, but the meaning behind their word choice, the meaning behind why they said it that way and not another way. And so your ability to be able to hear and discern depends on your ability to be constantly reflecting internally on what they're saying as they speak with you in dialogue. So this is a very important hearing skill, not just a surface level listening skill, but this is an important hearing skill, because what I teach is not just about listening, it's hearing to discern. So this is the next step of the framework. It is R, which stands for reflect. And the last step in my F.L.A.R.E framework is the letter E, and the letter E stands for expand. There's multiple expansion directions that I'm referring to here. The first direction of expansion is to expand your time horizons. When you are speaking with senior executives, they're working in expansive time horizons. They don't just look at what's going to happen month to month or quarter to quarter or maybe year on year. They are planning 5 years out, 10 years out, and sometimes even lifetimes out. They want to change the world, and they see a future of their grandkids, what is the generational benefit of what we're doing right now. So start to expand your time horizons more than they have been, so that you can see what you haven't been able to see. That's the first area of expansion. The other area of expansion is to expand your space. When you are so busy in busyness, in the details of what you're doing, the projects of what you're working on, it's really easy to adapt a very micro space around you. Like, I can manage my team around me and my projects around me and what my task and responsibilities are. But then, can you see the big picture of the whole business function? Can you see the big picture of the whole company? What about the whole industry? What about the geography? What about the whole world and how it's influencing the ripple effect on that you're having in the work that you're doing? Can you see that expansive space as it goes like concentric circles out and out and out around you? So that is the second area of expansion. And the third area of expansion, which is the most important one, is the expansion of your own perspectives. Wisdom, here's what wisdom says. If you change the way you see the world around you, the world around you changes. So how can you expand your perspectives so that you start to see the things you did not see before? So you start to challenge what you think you're seeing and start to see what's really there. So that you can challenge what you think you already know, and that way you can uncover the areas that you have not known, that you never knew existed. That is a continual expansion process, and that is the most important personal development journey you can be on. So this is my F.L.A.R.E framework on how you can step up and have presence and communicate with your executives with power and authority. There are 4 key soft skills that you may be missing in your training. I'm going to talk about those in my next video coming right up next. I'll see you there.